Why do you think there's like a stigma? You know, like when someone says mental health or I need to see a I need there's just a stigma, right? It's not in my head. I'm pretty sure there's just a stigma
No,
out there, right?
it's there.
Okay.
It's there.
Hey guys, in today's video, my guest is Nastasya Rose, who runs VIVE. Check out whyvive.com for mental health related things. Basically, helping creators to be in the best energy and mental health to ignite their vision for generations that come. So, mental health is very important. You know me, I'm all about like physical health, right? Which is equally important. But a lot of people don't pay attention to their mental health, and there should not be a stigma related to that. So, this is a fun discussion. She just happens to be Luis Esteban's daughter, by the way, co writer of Only the Strong. So, she's going to share some really fun stories related to that because she grew up with Sheldon Lettich's kids and Van Damme's kids. So, all kinds of interesting discussions, some cool story with Mark Dacascos. But so this video is really good. You know, we get kind of like some insight into that world, her perspective, and of course, a discussion on mental health, which should not have the stigma that it seems to have. So, anyway, if you want to check her out, the services she offers, which I think could be beneficial for pretty much anybody, all that information is linked in the description below. And if you like this kind of content, please help support the channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, and sharing the video. So, just to catch up everyone to speed, this is Nastasya, Luis Esteban's daughter, who, of course, you've seen on the channel talking about Only the Strong. He was co-writer. He did so much more in that film, amazing film. And you're part of this whole world, and you even grew up with like some of Sheldon Lettich's kids and Van Damme's kids. And of course, you were around when your father was basically creating and making and filming and even editing Only the Strong. Just to start off, let me ask you this. Did you ever think, and I know you were really young at the time when they were making that movie, but did you ever think like people would still be talking about this film 25 years after it came out and that there's so many people that like want a sequel and everything else? Did you ever think that it would have that kind of impact?
Great question. Hi everybody. So, great question. I knew it was always a great film, but to see it in action like 30 years later is pretty amazing. So that's the part that really excites me, is that it's still being talked about and we all naturally support it. So anytime my dad will ever call me and say, hey, there's a chance for this to happen, there's a chance for that to happen, I'm like, yes, go. So I didn't see it coming, but I always knew it was a great film, and it has such great lessons in there, as anyone who watched it knows.
I've got some major news for you, man. This world can be about as big as you ever want it to be, or as small as your own tiny little hood.
And anytime anyone who does know the film knows that there's a relation of me and the writer of the film, it's like everyone jumps into it and starts singing the Pananawe song or start showing me how they can do capoeira. Yeah, like they just dive right into it. So I didn't see it getting this far, but I'm also not surprised. Yeah.
When did your dad like first talk about a potential sequel anyway? Like, was it 10 years ago? Was it more like over the last year, or when did that come up?
To be honest, I mean, my dad could quote me if I'm wrong, but I really want to believe it was within the first decade, only because now that I've like gone back, which I've told you this before, I love how you're getting everyone's viewpoints. Like there's such great footage here to the point where there definitely has to be a playlist with all of us speaking on it. But, I feel like with hearing everyone, with hearing Sheldon, with hearing my dad, with seeing the research you've done on Mark, which is exquisite.
Oh,
You do so good on that. And I'm just so proud of you that you actually like get the heart of the due diligence, So witnessing all of this, I want to say it was within the first decade. And my dad could quote me if I'm wrong. And the reason why I say that is because after hearing all the facts, I think we all wanted it to stay alive. We all did, like every single one of us, and we all had that fight. And to the point where we literally matched the title of the film, Only the Strong, so 30 years later, I would love to see some greatness, but I want to say it was within the first decade that everyone was trying to think of the next thing for it. Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of Mark, you had like some experiences, like when they were filming it, when he was like part of the editing, right? Like, weren't you with them? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so one thing that I love about Mark is that he was so involved with my dad, and I honored that so much. Like, when do you see the lead in the editing room with you, you know? And we were just hanging out there watching the same scenes multiple times, up to hundreds of times. And I don't know if my dad even knows that I remember, but I was just chilling with Mark in the editing room, and he just wanted to be so involved in the production of it all, which was so humbling and so beautiful to witness. And I still remember that day and witnessing being with Mark in the editing room. And I just remember telling to myself, and I was young, I was like 4, you know, and I remember telling myself, like, I want to create in my craft like this. Like, that's what I wanted to be, like this, where there's involvement in the production of things, and we all learned together, we all evolved together. It was the most humbling thing to witness in the film.
Wow, that's definitely a reason why it's such a classic. Like, I feel like when an actor gets that involved, like Van Damme was very similar, for example, in the editing room. Like Sheldon Lettich talked about that, doing the ADR, doing, cutting the film a certain way. And before I talked to you about Mark, I didn't know he was that involved. Like a lot of actors, they're like, it's a job. Like you get hired to act, you do your part, and then that's it. But, people like Van Damme, I guess like Mark, which I didn't know until now. I know Stallone, a lot of those people just are involved in the whole process, even from like the story inception sometime all the way till like the final edits. And that's why those films are so good, because it kind of has their stamp and their signature on the whole thing. Your dad's too, because he was obviously co-writer and then on the film, in the film. And I never even talked to him about like the editing part. Like, I didn't know if he was just there during the production, but I guess he was there even during the editing as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I think my dad probably peeped that I enjoyed that process too, or else I wouldn't be there, right? Like, I don't think it was just because he had to watch his kid. I think it's because of the way that my eyes lit up when I was the kid in the room.
Oh, sure.
Not just because of the privilege of being a kid in there, but because I got to witness everything, I got to see everything, and that was definitely some of the most exciting parts of my childhood. So, and again, it was humbling witnessing Mark in there, because the involvement that is there, people could let the fame get to their heads, but not Mark. That wasn't him. He's till this day very humble in the craft, because and it makes sense, because how else do we learn, right? The involvement. So it's just so refreshing and exciting to see. It's motivating.
Yeah, definitely. And Mark definitely seems like a humble guy. But speaking of humbleness, your dad is extremely humble, right? Like, can you tell us a little more about his martial arts background? He didn't say too much, but I think most people can get, he's really high level. Most people in the martial arts really like to talk themselves up. If anything, though, he doesn't talk about himself at all related to martial arts world.
Yeah, he's extremely humble. I will call him out. Sometimes I say he's too humble. So, I definitely say that. And sometimes I can be too, and I'm working on that myself. It's a trait. It can be a blessing and a curse if we're not careful. So, I feel like I'm the next generation really sharing the moderation of the characteristic. But yes, he is very humble. The script was written off of his life. He was the teacher in real life in the Bronx, teaching to the roughnecks of the neighborhood, and it's just really nice to witness that come into life, and how he was able to bring his story and how much it's motivated so many people. So to really see that happen, where you see Luis on the screen, like the name, and
Yeah,
then
the
even
name.
better, yeah, like, and even better, he gets to be in the basketball scene with the fights. And
now maybe you don't hear so good. He said go now.
Every time when I saw him in that scene, that's my dad, like, just screaming it out loud, just witnessing how involved my dad was. Like, it's just so great, and obviously now what I try to motivate is that we keep our energy and preservation with the way that we execute our passion, obviously, but I want to believe that there's still ways today that we can be that involved and not deplete our energy as so much, because I care for him. I want him to be able to rest too, as much as enjoy the work. So, but yes, he is definitely humble. And I love that his real life was able to be a big contribution of what actually brought this to life. And if it's anyone who's going to vouch for him and be his little agent for a second, that's going to be me.
When you were growing up, did you see him like practicing and training martial arts a lot, or would he like leave the house and probably do his training somewhere else?
He trained a lot in his spare time. Sometimes I think he thought I wasn't looking, but I was. And, I even, tried to take on classes for a little while, but really it was the singing and the psychology for me. That was really my area. And then I would do acting, a little random acting with our friends, those that we grew up with, the kids of the Van Dammes, the kids of the Lettiches, and me. Like, we all had our own little scripts. But with him, he always had his training as peace. Even till this day, there's something training related that he's always doing so that he can physically feel equipped for the craft. Like right now, he's big on hiking and strength training, and that's a big thing for him, so he's
Someone real quick commented, by the way, that he was looking pretty jacked, like in the interview, like his arms and stuff, so it's funny you mentioned the strength training, because he's obviously like an older guy, even like he's probably around like my dad's age, for example, but yeah, he looks good.
Yeah, my dad was definitely the Casanova growing up, like that was for sure. And it was always like, there was always some sort of woman trying to take my dad over, but he was very much about making sure that I grew up in one piece. So, there was one that was super close to like being the stepmom, but it just didn't happen. Other than that, it was a lot of almost, but he definitely was the Casanova that always had some sort of training going on. So whether it was martial arts, whether it was strength training, whether it was hiking, swimming, he always had something going on to keep him well equipped for the craft. Yeah.
Sure. Exactly. Can you tell us like a little bit about like how was Chris Van Damme growing up? Because you guys spent some time together, right?
Yeah, it was amazing reconnecting with him again. So, fun fact, the three of us who were the closest in the crew, like between the Van Dammes, the Lettiches, and myself, it was me, Angelique, and Chris. So the three of us were pretty much the same exact age. Like, we're literally months apart on our birthdays, same year. So, me and Angelique were absolutely inseparable. And then Chris would be within our little clique space too, because we were the closest in age, all of us. So it was nice reconnecting with him again, because we literally recouped 20 years in one night. Wow. I think that was like around the last time that we had seen each other. So I flew in after graduating finally with my Bachelor of Science in Addiction Counseling. And I wanted to take a couple of days off to just breathe, reflect, reconnect with my dad. And I was able to connect with Chris, and it was great. It was absolutely great. So, growing up with him, we had so many memories of our own scripts. Other people have playtime where you're like playing house. With us, we had like real productions going on while our dads were smoking their cigars and having their drinks. Like, it was really like we had a real thing. We had different sets in the house. So, we would all link up at either the Lettich's household or at the Van Dammes household. And we had our scripts, we had our roles, we had our places in production. Like, we knew everything we were doing. And I think that was one of the most fun memories that we had when we were catching up on all of it, was how we all had our roles. They would always select me as the lead for acting. And, the scripts and the direction was usually navigated amongst the rest, and everyone had their own places. So that was really what was fun. Like, I want to say I had a really cool childhood in that light. I totally better than just playing house. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely sounds like it. So when you were doing like all these scenes and acting, you'd almost think, I know you said you guys wrote them yourselves. You'd almost think you would just take some of Sheldon Lettich's, because he's written so many scripts that haven't even like been filmed, right? He's just must have stacks of them. But so when you were growing up though, doing these scenes, did you not want to be an actress though? Because I know you eventually got into like singing and that stuff, but did you not have an interest in acting?
You know what's funny is I'm actually considering getting back into acting classes, but the reason for that is because of my work that I do today for my practice. We have these like luxury style shoots, and now we're taking things to the next level with the content creation. So I want to really feel like I'm in the role, in the,
Oh,
scene.
that okay.
But yeah, but it's really more for my work. I mean, if it ever happened in the future, I know it would be a lot of fun, but honestly, what really thrilled me to play the lead actress in, these scripts that we did as kids was the art and love that Angelique had for writing. Like, even though Sheldon says that she did her MBA and she did her thing with that, which I'm super proud of her,
Mhm.
part of me still wonders, just because of the childhood that we've had, if she's ever going to get into it again, just because she was the one who wrote the scripts and I would review the scripts with her. And there was even one cool script that I remember called The Strong Friendship. And my dad's like trying to reconnect us now. So I have the Strong Friendship Crew literally as our group name in our phone, because it was such a good script, and I loved acting it. And I would review these scripts with her that she would write. And, even during our last most intimate connection, which is again, like over 20 years ago, she had a script she was working on. So I feel like you give credit where it's due.
Mhm.
I was the one that was really great at acting out the scripts. And I think that's why they would keep selecting me as the lead, because I would get real zoned in on it. Like it was who I am. And I just became a different human. And I fell in love with that part of the craft. And probably, hence the music, right? And then with Angelique, she wrote the scripts. And Micheline, the eldest, she would do the directing. And Jessica, she would handle all the things in between, and Chris would kind of like co-star with us. So, that was really like the crew, like the crew and cast. So it was really awesome to witness that. And, Angelique would act out scenes with me, but she was the one with the writing. She was the one with the scripts. Like she had these huge visions and she would just write it down. And, we're talking like 10, 12 years old. And she was writing up to hundreds of pages in a script.
That's
As if
funny because obviously Sheldon Lettich is a very accomplished, well-known writer. Like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Mhm.
Like it makes sense. She would be the one writing them all. And like you said, I guess his other daughter was like the one directing. Sheldon Lettich, obviously also known as a director, but pretty funny.
Yeah, like Micheline was strong with the directing skills. Me and Chris were joking on that too when we had reconnected. But with Angelique, like she had the vision. You know what I mean? Like she had that out. And I'm always a big believer in us working great together, however we're great. And I could get into writing. My dad's great at writing, but she had it, like that was her area, was the ability to just dive in and see a full story and get it down on paper. And that was her thing. So I wanted her to have her thing, and I would be her actress putting her vision out onto the film. Yeah.
Oh wow. So you have your own business now, Vive, right? Dealing with mental health. How did
Yeah.
you like get that whole thing started? What was the motivation and the reason for that?
Yeah. So the motivation for that really started with my mother. So, we all have our trauma, we all have our stories on how we come up, and that affects or not affects our focus on our craft. And for me, it was my mom. She was diagnosed bipolar when I was 14. And from 4 to 14, it was just a lot of trauma that I didn't understand. And I was attracting trauma as well. And I didn't understand why it was happening. But once my mom was diagnosed bipolar, it all made sense. Like a lot of the trauma that was happening was because of what I faced at home. So from that split second, my mom was pissed with the diagnosis, but I was relieved because it finally clicked on why things were happening the way that they were. So I had said, I want to help creators succeed past their circumstances so that they can still succeed regardless of times like this. And I started researching like crazy from 14 to my early 20s, and then finally started the practice in 2010.
Well, let me ask you this. You said your mom was pissed after she was diagnosed and you were relieved. You'd almost think she would be would enjoy finding that out, right? Because I lived with a bipolar roommate in college, right?
Mm.
Not easy, but
No.
I would almost think a person in that state of like two extremes, shifting would actually enjoy hearing, oh, it's really probably like a chemical imbalance or something going on. You're not just this volatile. There's like a different reason behind it. You'd almost think they would like finding that out and then seek help based on, that diagnosis.
It really depends on the person. So, for example, in my mother's case, she was extremely frustrated because she was already building a career as one of the best paralegals for CVS.
Oh,
When
wow.
CVS and yeah, like when CVS and Viacom were like huge, like she was already caking it, having graduated from Mercy College. She took continuing education at NYU. She was on a roll, but the emotional chemical imbalance was really catching up, right? And then finally, with the diagnosis, I want to imagine that she was pissed because this is a huge thing that could really get in her way of taking her LSATs to be a lawyer, wanting to be a preacher the way that she wanted to. Like, if she was to choose her life, I feel that she would have been a preacher and a lawyer. Like, that would have just totally been her thing. If she wasn't studying law, she was studying the Bible. Like that was definitely something that her and my dad and had in common. Like, they were always in the Bible and doing their research, and it kind of makes sense now how they were together. I had an angry face at one point because it didn't make sense why they got together, but now I get it. Like, there were traits that attracted them to one another for sure. But in my mom's case, I want to presume that she was frustrated because that's one of the most tough, most difficult diagnoses to have. So you have to really figure out where exactly the chemical imbalance is coming from. You need to make sure that whatever prescriber or psychiatrist you're dealing with, they better be on point with your medications, because unfortunately there can be too many scripts when there doesn't need to be. All of that can be extremely frustrating when it comes to finding the right practitioner to work with you. And she saw that coming, maybe, and maybe that was an area where she was frustrated. I don't want to presume that she didn't want to be helped. Even though there are scenarios where you have to want to be helped in order to get help and really do the deep, dirty work to work on your inner issues, sometimes issues that have been passed on since generations before you. But I want to presume that she was just so angry of the journey now that was coming up in front of her, and probably with a mix of ego in the way. She was putting in the work to become this independent woman, and how do you navigate that, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of people are in denial about, the possibility they might be bipolar. I'm not going to name any names, but there's people that I am aware of. And when, proposed to them, they don't really take it that well,
Yeah.
because there's definitely a negative like stigma, like if you might insinuate you might be bipolar, like that doesn't go down so well, I've noticed.
Yeah, no, you can't just do it cutthroat like that. You gotta, you can't do it that way. No, sir. You have to really there's a maneuver of it. There's a protocol. There's a method. Hence why there's so much studious activity taking place in order to be a licensed professional, right? Like, even now I'm studying code of ethics with the American Psychological Association as much as with the International Coaching Federation. And there's so many different levels of protocol. But if you were to talk to a friend, for example, right, and you witness there may be something a little bit off, there's the little tiny indirect messages that we know that you care for them, but they have to care for them too, in terms of that type of a diagnosis or any types of symptoms that could be leading up to that. They have to really want to choose to dive deep within that work themselves. And even after the diagnosis is given, it's up to them for the treatment. It's up to them to really stand up for themselves in the treatment, because if you're forcing them, that could go into so many different types of legal issues, disrespectful issues, bad ways of communication. And you don't want that. You don't want to burn those bridges. It's really a matter of seeing the entire scenario as is. And if you do see that there's a problem with a dear one and you want them to thrive, just, finding out little ways to put the little signal out, but without being like, hey, you may have this.
Yeah, sure. People in general get very defensive, and it's almost like you're pointing out a character flaw, and they're like, no, I'm not, but is there like a common theme you've noticed a lot of your clientele, right, that come to you? Like, is there like a common theme as far as why you think they might be suffering from mental illness? Or
Yeah, so it depends on the type of clientele. So we work with patients, celebrities, members, and clients, right? So that are creators and entrepreneurs. So if they're a creator or entrepreneur that's not as famous, they're struggling about how the money's going to come in. They're struggling on the strategy, and they're struggling with the simplicity of it because there's so many ideas in their head coming in and out that it's a tough thing for them to just be focused. So I'll usually work with them on their focus and make sure that their focus is intact. With the celebrities that I've worked with that are up there already and they're not struggling about money, they're not struggling about anything that, you know, could financially have them in any type of a bind. They just want to maintain it and keep scaling.
Mm-hmm.
It's normally internal work and the level of focus because of what's around them. So if it's, you know, a celebrity that wants to be focused with their kids, but they have so much projects going on, how do they balance that? Or maybe internal issues that they haven't fully resolved yet, but they would like to, so that their work can feel like second nature.
Let me ask you this. I feel like a lot of people get overwhelmed. Now, do you think the person coming up who hasn't quite made it yet is more overwhelmed because there's so many things they're thinking about, so many things they're trying to do? Or do you think it's the person that has already made it and they're trying to juggle and find balance? Do you find they tend to be more overwhelmed, or the person who's like trying to come up?
I honestly feel with after doing this for 11 years and 20 years of researching on it, it really can be level, just different types of challenges. So let's say it's someone who hasn't financially come up yet.
Mhm.
There's the imposter syndrome to the core, and they just don't know how to silence that noise, right? Whereas someone who's already making it, they may have felt like they got lucky because they didn't handle their inner issues. So now it's like really eating them alive once they get to that point, hence reaching out for our help to maintain, sustain, and continue to evolve.
You mean
So
almost in the sense that they don't feel they're deserving of like their place, like of their level of success? They don't feel
I
like they
don't
deserve it for some reason, you think? Or
I don't believe it's that they feel that they don't deserve it. I feel that it's that they're consistently under the pressure. So the pressure to deliver, the pressure to give results, the pressure of something. And that pressure is the overwhelm. So it's not that they don't feel that they're deserving because they know the hard work that they did to get to where they are. But the fact that they didn't resolve things internally that may keep attracting the wrong guy or girl, or you know, may keep having strain with their kids, or may keep having strain with their creative blocks that they may face that nobody knows about in their craft, or their addictions that they're still not talking about, whether it's sex, drugs, or alcohol, which was actually how I did get started with celebrities. I was helping them get off those types of addictions so that they could really go and be more focused in their craft. You know, it's a level where they haven't faced more of the internal things yet, and they've just held on to it because either they've attempted to reach out to another practitioner and it wasn't successful, or they just didn't think that they needed to work on it when the point in their career came where there was no other choice but to work on it.
interesting. Do you also work with athletes?
I have
Because that,
worked
it
with
seems like it would make sense with the pressure they put on themselves. And it's like you hear so many stories when the athlete, you know, just enjoys and has fun and why they got involved in their game in the first place. They perform way better when they don't put all that extra pressure on themselves. So I feel like you could probably help a lot of athletes, you know, realize
Yeah,
and
like
get back to just having fun and enjoying the process.
yeah, like I've worked with marathon runners, and I was in a season where I wanted to get into training basketball athletes because I was just so addicted to the ways of the sport on the court. But the reason why I didn't pursue it was because there's a unique level of pressure for an athlete where they have to stay on point. And if I'm diving with them into their inner issues where they need to be consistently on point on and off season,
Mhm.
last thing I want is to risk detrimenting that level of consistency that they have to keep for their higher ups. So that's why I didn't pursue it. But of course, if any athlete is going to come to me and say, hey, I want to work on this and I'll just do everything in my power to not let it slow down my consistency, I'm going to say, heck yeah, let's go. Like, you know, so that's really where it was at. But yeah, that's why I didn't pursue working with athletes in the ways that I could have. But I still study the sport, of course, like when it comes to the mentality that it would take for them to be consistent. If an athlete ever came to me, I would be ready.
Interesting. Do you get more fulfillment helping the people who are coming up or the people who have already made it, or is it not really a difference to you?
I get a thrill for the underdog.
Yeah, people
So
love the
yeah.
underdog, right? I got root for the underdog.
I get a thrill for the underdog all the way. I love when that, like, the bigger the mess, the bigger the adrenaline for me sometimes. Like
Okay.
that's really where it is with me. And I have a couple entrepreneurial colleagues who feel the same way. It's just, those are the ones who aren't heard and maybe they should be,
Mm.
so that's really where it is sometimes. Sometimes it's in the craziest situations where you have the best, most empowering story. And, it could be because of what I've been through with my mom. It could be because of what I've been through in my upbringing, but it could be because of the hard work that I've done, that my dad's done, that sometimes I just feel isn't noticed enough. It could be any of those scenarios or all of them, but either way, I really root for the underdog that has just been fighting so long to be understood, but hasn't been heard. That's the one where I'm like, okay, let's work on your emotional intelligence. Let's work on how you're coming up. Let's work on the strategy, the stability, the foundation. Let's work on the simplicity so that you can focus on one thing and then build on tiers after that one thing succeeds. These are all the things that people don't have patience nor the ability to hold space for when it comes to working with an underdog or someone that's not as recognized yet. And I get my thrill off of
Okay.
creating a success story with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Let me ask you this, and I know it's a case by case basis, literally, right? But is there a certain objective you try to meet with your clients? For example, they come to you, they need help. Do you usually try to say, I really want to be able to help this person and have them back to where they need to be within like 6 months? Or do you not set those kind of deadlines for yourself or for them?
I do. So, we have certain services with deadlines, right? So, like, for example, our signature membership, Rock the Breakthrough, where we're helping our members really know what it is to scale to a 7-figure brand or business while keeping their energy and mental health first within their craft. That's a year membership. And I'm giving them 1 year access with me and the team to really figure it all out. And I'm giving them all the tools and the resources to discover their answers, but they have to do the work. The deadline that I give for our higher ticket program, where I'm helping creators and entrepreneurs be able to create 6-figure plus launches inside of their brand or business while keeping their energy and mental health first, that's a 6-month deadline, right? Where either they're choosing to learn everything and do the launch with our support, or they're just learning everything and doing the launch after the work is done. So that's that. And then with our mastermind, that's a year, where they really like dive in on the deepest level possible with their vision.
Okay, that makes sense. It's kind of a unique business if you think about it, because most businesses, like, you want a lifelong client. But if you had a lifelong client, that's like a failure in a way because a person never got their help. So it's like you want them to leave you, which is really weird to think about when you run a business.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really depends, right? So, for example, I'm never ashamed to tell this story. The way that I'm coming up now, I've been running the practice for 11 years. I was definitely broke for the first decade of it. You know what I mean? So I feel like I feel like I totally pivoted in the pandemic because we all either plummeted or pivoted. There was a
Sure.
choice. And I chose to pivot and completely evolved it over the past 2 years with nonstop consistency for 5 years straight from 2017 and developing the services that we have today. So think about it. If I'm 5 years in on remaining consistent with no breaks on how we're developing these services, it would make sense to have mentorship along the way. And the realistic truth of it is that we keep doing these quick deadlines, and it's not that way. You can work with someone for 3 months or 6 months or a year in order to really get to a certain level, but the majority of my clients always renew. I have clients who have been with me since the beginning in 2010. And it's because there's always a new level to the work. And it would make sense to work with a mentor who, here's the kicker, is doing the continuous research and consistently innovating. Now, if the mentor is only sticking with one thing, that's where it's not a success and you're definitely going to move on. But the way that our work is, we are forever innovating. We're forever evolving. So they're going to forever want to stick with us because they're going to want to know the next best thing that's going to keep helping them be better, because it's all psychologically research related. So we're never going to end on that trend, even when I pass it forth after I'm gone. So that's why I have long-term people here. But yeah, if the person they're trying to learn from isn't on that wavelength and it's just the same thing, I give it a year, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, what does VIVE stand for anyway? It's an acronym, right?
Yeah, it stands for a vision to inspire the best version of energy. So we're really big on our creators, our entrepreneurs, our celebrities, our patients for our larger accounts to really be able to evolve in the best energy possible in their space. When we have the best energy in our space, we can really do some beautiful things.
Interesting. Do you find it hard to separate like work with your real life? So, for example, you mentioned, you and Chris caught back up after like 20 years, and you guys probably have a pretty nice, intimate discussion about various things. Are you like working, like analyzing everything he's saying? Because you're probably just so accustomed to doing that with your just, relationships with friends, for example.
I know how to turn the on switch off now. So, that wasn't the easiest thing to do because like in the first few years when you're always broke, you're always selling. So, that was definitely like not an easy thing to do at first, but now I have great, connection skills. So, and that has a lot to deal with the research that I have done, right? Knowing when to respect a person or respect a colleague, right? So, for example, with Chris, like we talked about what we're doing for work, but and if we end up collaborating on anything beautiful, but it's a natural thing. It's not going to be because we were trying to use each other or because we were trying to force each other into anything. Like it just happened to click, right? So that's really the objective that I would have with any connection that I have in my life, is that I believe that when you connect with a person, it's for a reason. And whatever that number one reason is, that's what you're meant to embrace. And you make sure that you respect that. And that's what I always do my best to do with every connection that I ever have. And if I ever, feel the inspiration to mention what I love about the connection, I'll say it. Right? Like how you and I were talking before this interview. I was like, I love how we always just get into these cool conversations. And it's just so natural,
Sure.
like because the topics are great, they're exciting. Like that's the truth when you have a conversation with a person. And, if you happen to do work together, beautiful, but it's really about the well-being of the other person. And I think that's something that Chris values in me and that I value in him, is that that's the truth of it. I want him to do great. I want him to excel in what he's meant to do in the world. And I think that he's in a good direction right now to make that happen.
That's awesome. Let me ask you this, like one last question related to mental health. Why do you think there's like a stigma? Like when someone says mental health, or I need to see there's just a stigma, right? It's not in my head. I'm pretty sure there's just a stigma out there, right?
It's there. It's there. Do you want to know why it exists, like to where people feel like it's a problem to go get help in something?
Yeah, because you might be able to convince somebody to seek you out, or another mental health professional, because maybe some people don't want to seek someone out because there's that stigma.
Yeah, like I feel like the pandemic got people open-minded and I ran with it, and that's why I'm doing well now. Like I guarantee you, like the success that's existing right now in my practice did not exist before 2020. So, but at the same time, what helped it proceed was my passion of wanting to help those who were open-minded. So to answer your question, I feel like the stigma exists because there's not enough knowledge on it. Like people aren't educated enough on how well it can really help them. And that's not entirely their fault. It also has to deal on the execution of the practitioner. So for example, like the gorgeous, perfect question I feel that you had asked me, thank you for that, on, if there's an on and off button with work. Same thing goes with how the practitioner operates with a potential or an active patient. If they're not really focused in the room on the patient, how's the patient going to get help? And patients aren't dumb, like they know when they want to be heard, they know how they want to be heard. And if that's not happening, they're going to walk and they're going to be pissed, and that's going to possibly traumatize them, and because now they have to keep going through their insurance plans in order to keep getting to the right practitioner until they quit. And I know exactly how that feels because I was one of them. It's again, one of the reasons why I started the practice. I wanted to help people past their circumstances and get them the aligned help that they desire, not what they need, what they desire. You know, practitioners try to put it on us as though we're a problem, when really it's just that we've survived some real things and we would like to get to the bottom of it to evolve with it. I think that's what we all want at the end of the day. And having the right aligned person to hear us when we communicate that, that's a gift. Like, people don't treat it as a normal conversation, and sometimes we should. And that's why the stigmas exist, because it's not being treated with love and care and support in the ways that it should be. We can make it a normalized conversation, and we should make it a normalized conversation, especially after what we've witnessed in the pandemic. So with our space and the way that I train my team to be able to normalize conversations like anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, family trauma, you know, surviving sexual assault, like all these types of things, CPTSD, PTSD, you know, bipolar diagnosis, we help to normalize the conversation where there really is a safe space. And then still, it's up to the client, and if they wish to move forward, and with the promise that they will continuously put in the work to work on themselves. Because at the end of the day, the number one person who's going to control whatever chemical imbalance or whatever traumatic thought is existent within their mind, it's them. We're here to simply be able to give the tools, the resources, with the safe space of normalizing the conversation so that they don't feel so abnormal while having the conversation.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So is mental health, though, in general, I didn't even know it was covered by insurance. It is.
Yes.
It should be.
Yes.
I mean,
it should. It definitely should be. So, you know, it depends on the level, right? So coaching, there's our workarounds with it when it comes to coaching. It's usually faster for a clinician or for a psychologist, because now they have their own licensure, so they can deal with the health insurances directly. But with me, I have to do like the whole wiggle leg room around everything in order to have good licensed practitioners and professionals in my network that I can work in complement with. And that's how we can get to the point where certain services, when it comes to mental health treatment plans, are able to be covered by insurance. Certain stuff, when it comes to what we do with entrepreneurs and creators to help make them successful, at the end of the day, I'm helping them with a business and with becoming financially profitable. So that's more difficult to cover under insurance. But when it's directly with mental health, yeah, there's ways around it where their insurance plans can cover it.
hey, so where can people find out more about like what you have to offer, and if they want to sign up, or, you know, I don't know if you offer like a free one-time consultation or anything like that, or
I do. I call them clarity
Okay.
calls. So, and I'll give you a link for it so you can share it with your people, where they would basically chat with me for 20 to 30 minutes, and they would be able to share with us what their vision is, what they're working on, and then we can be able to determine if we could help them and what's the best service that they should take from us in order to do that. And we could even go into what's the best payment plan for them if they need an extended payment plan, all those things. And it would be at yvive.com that they could go to learn more about us. But there's a specific link where they can just skip straight to booking their clarity call, and I'll give you that link too.
Oh, that's cool. So it sounds like you really, like, I try to make it as easy as you can working with certain people, as far as like, you know, helping them with the payment plans if they need that or anything else. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm the customization queen. Only because, you know, it's just, we all have our different situations. We all have our different barriers. And that's what I wanted someone to be able to do for me. Like, I want someone's work to be respected and valued, where they're not, you know, downing their price. But if I need an extended payment plan so that I can get in the door, I need an extended payment plan, and I'm going to ask for it. Right. So that's always something from my underdog days that, you know, I want to offer now.